Hi, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Today we are recording episode 31, which is going to be our last episode from our first season.
Yes, yeah, this is going to be a fun kind of look back on the season.
Yeah, so let's jump in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
So it's very hard for me to believe that we are at the end of season 1. I can vividly remember us getting together and discussing what we wanted this podcast to be, and we've completed our first season. How do you feel about that, Vivian?
Oh, great. It's been so fun. And I do think it's funny because I feel like we were so naive way back when we were planning out what we wanted to most talk about. Because really what ended up happening is that we would talk about something and release it and then completely diverge from our path because we felt like there were these other more pressing topics to talk about. So we have all of these original ideas still queued up that we haven't even gotten to yet. So not only has it been fun, but I feel like there's so much more to cover and I'm excited to do that.
Yeah, I also think that you and I, in the very beginning, I don't know if listeners remember, it was not very natural, like for me to be talking on camera or speaking in the microphone. Like it has been a learning curve, especially for me this first season.
I do remember the first couple of recordings being like, oh, Sylvia, you don't sound like yourself. Like, I know
Yes.
how you sound when we talk, and that's what I need.
Yeah, I think I was really nervous in the beginning, especially with the camera and videoing. I'm like, oh, all of this is a little overwhelming. But I feel like, after a couple of episodes, into season 1, I think we really kind of hit our groove and it's been so much fun for me to do this.
Yes, yeah, you've made something that was very much out of your comfort zone to start. Now, well in your comfort zone. This
Yeah,
is a good lesson in life.
yes,
Yeah.
like in my latter half of my life, I'm learning to do something new. So, it's been super fun. In this season wrap up, I think what I would like to do is kind of talk more about what's out there, in the news and our medical journals and how it relates to certain topics that we've covered in season 1, just to kind of bring everything back.
Yeah, I feel like not only have our topics been validated by feedback we've gotten from listeners and from patients, but I also see it. I'm so much more aware of the things we've talked about. I see them come up again and again in medical literature, which is also super validating that these are really important topics to be discussing.
Yeah. So do you have, looking back on what we've released at the end of this season, do you have any thoughts or things that stand out?
Yeah. We recertify our basic life support CPR in our entire office. And I learned something at that class that I didn't know before. And I'm sure you know about it because you're in emergency medicine. Have you heard of the LifeVac?
Yes, totally. I have patients ask me about it.
I have never heard of this before, and they introduced it at the CPR course. So since you have experience with it, and I think it ties in to some of our baby-led weaning pros and cons, tell us what the LifeVac is.
Okay. I only know about LifeVac from my research on the internet, right? So
Okay.
it's a suction device, right? It looks like a kind of a typical like bag valve mask that we use with when we're resuscitating somebody, right? It fits around the nose and the mouth, but it has a suction device so that you compress the suction and then you release it. And the idea is that it's going to suck up anything that's stuck in the airway,
Right.
right?
It's like an anti-choking
Yes.
device. And this is when it came up in the CPR as we were reviewing the Heimlich, which is part of the CPR certification. Someone asked about the LifeVac, right?
Yes. Okay, this is what I've told people that have asked me. Okay, I mean, certainly, I don't think it can hurt, right? There's no harm in trying it. My gut is that it cannot take place of the Heimlich because, when you're suctioning air from the esophagus and the trachea. if you have something lodged in the trachea, you probably need more force than if you're actually able to take air from both. So I feel like it's probably a very interesting adjunct to the Heimlich, but everybody should still be trained in knowing how to do the Heimlich. I also point out, we have lots of anecdotal stories on this being effective, but we need more data, like large data on, was this effective in this scenario? Or did it actually inhibit somebody from doing the Heimlich, which might have been life-saving? I just don't know. Because when you do the Heimlich, you're actually forcing air from the lungs up, right? You're targeting the trachea, which is different than a suction device that's going to target anything from the entire
in the
oropharynx and
oropharynx,
airway.
right?
These are just my thoughts, but I don't know. That's not research-based. That's just my,
Right.
what I can
And
find on
I
the
have to
internet.
say, in this CPR class, the instructor was also just giving his thoughts.
Okay,
You know,
yes,
the
yes.
the the LifeVac is not part of the American Heart Association CPR certification.
Yeah.
But it just so happened that when someone brought up the LifeVac, our instructor actually had one,
Oh, okay.
like, in his bag.
Oh, so
So
he pulls it out.
yeah, he pulls it out, and I've never seen it. I
Okay,
actually
okay.
didn't even know what it was. So then he kinda showed us, on the CPR mannequin how the LifeVac works. And just anecdotally, some guy, ex-EMT CPR certifier, was a huge advocate of having it and saying that, like we talk a lot in our podcast about tools in the toolbox, right?
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
he mentioned it, like, of course, the course talks about the Heimlich and the way to properly do it for an adult, a child, after the adult becomes unconscious. We learned all of that protocol, right? That's
Yeah.
part of the course.
Yeah.
But he said having it as another tool in your toolbox,
Mm.
is not a bad thing to have. Of course, you do the CPR first, but if there is something lodged that the Heimlich is not dislodging, and
Okay.
you are, you've moved to, two-person CPR because they've lost consciousness, having the LifeVac and spending a moment in trying to dislodge whatever's in the airway, anecdotally at this point,
Mhm.
could be helpful. Whether or not we start talking about it in the context of this baby-led weaning
Yeah.
choking fear at home with parents. It's an interesting thought when we were talking about how fearful parents can be with first foods and choking, right?
I mean, it certainly is compelling to me that somebody whose career is training CPR carries it and advocates for it as a tool in the toolbox. Like it kind of goes along. I feel like with what I've been telling people is, I certainly don't think there's any harm in trying, but do not feel
Sure.
the comfort of letting it replace
Right.
Heimlich. Like you need to be
Right.
trained in that. Actually, Sylvia, I know you know this, but we can put a link in the show notes on this. But my daughter was saved by a classmate in high school who performed the Heimlich on her when she was choking and definitely had something lodged in her trachea at her high school. And
This year, like, it was just a couple of months ago, right?
yeah, and
No,
the
I'll put a
district,
link in the show notes. Yeah.
yes, the district did they were so impressed by this kid and this story that they did a whole little, video montage on how he learned the Heimlich during his health class in high school and then performed it on my daughter and, effectively saved her
Literally
life. And
saved her life,
they
right?
gave her a big award. So at any rate, I am like very thankful that the Heimlich is being taught far and wide.
Right.
Yeah, so that's really interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that kind of came up in these last few weeks related to something that we just released in these last 10 episodes, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
related to because, of course, that infant toddler age is the highest age
Right.
range where these choking events occur and can be so scary, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Have you come across any articles that you want to talk about at today's episode?
I have a couple of articles that showed up in my inbox just this past couple of weeks that were related to things we talked about. And one of them was a dermatologist speaking on acne. And her push to us as pediatricians was, don't just write a prescription for generic tretinoin. You need to have a multifaceted approach to acne. So her article was very much about, as the prescriber, the prescription options that we have to attack acne on multiple levels. So I feel like that really validated the things we had said in the episode and our encouragement to our listeners and our patients of how to go to your pharmacy or your local grocery store and find a multi-step approach just with what's available to you over the counter.
Right, absolutely. I think I saw a similar article from the Academy of Pediatrics, Guidelines of the Care for the Management of Acne Vulgaris. And in this article, it kind of highlights all of the regimens that we talked about in our episode, plus some prescription options. And the take home message from this was as well, not just one agent, use multiple agents nowadays to counteract acne, with the thought of using oral Accutane earlier than you may have before, right?
Right, right. Another article that came through my inbox in the past couple of weeks was again highlighting the new guidelines that came out on resuscitation procedures after drowning.
Mm,
And the gist of it is that this was a collaboration between the American Heart Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics, to highlight the idea that rescue breaths are very important in drowning or near drowning events.
mhm.
And that goes really well with the story I told in that episode of how, in my situation where I was involved in resuscitating a child after a near drowning, I immediately gave breaths.
Yeah,
And I did that instinctively before I even stopped to check for the pulse. I immediately gave breaths and then was starting to check for the pulse when the child started crying.
right.
So I think this is really important because so much of CPR training is focused on uh, good compressions, which we know saves lives. And we know that the majority of the time in adults, when there is a arrest, it is a cardiac event and they need good compressions first and foremost. Drowning is a little bit different. We always assume that that's probably respiratory, that
Right.
for a child that they fell into the pool, they stopped breathing, and then it becomes a cardiac arrest. So if we can intervene in that cycle before they go into cardiac arrest by immediately giving breaths, that is life-saving for children. And the other thing I liked in this article is that it does make a point that there may be a situation where you're rescuing a child in a pool where you actually can give breaths in the water. You
Yeah.
know, obviously you can't do compressions in the water, but it depending on where you are, certainly in open water, if you're somewhere where it's difficult to get to shore, it's always reasonable to try giving breaths.
Mhm.
So
No, that's really good advice, and it's very validating, and it fits your story and narrative perfectly, right?
I did notice recently that what has been appearing on my news feed is that there was recently an influencer whose husband was home with their toddler and their newborn, and the toddler actually drowned in their
Oh.
backyard pool,
Oh,
which
those are
is
so
just
sad.
always devastating every time you
Yes.
hear that. You know, I mean, I
Yes.
think we all can think of multiple famous people where that story has come out, and it just really compels me to tell listeners again, if you have a backyard pool, listen to our episode, because it's so much about creating multiple systems, multiple points of
Right.
safety, so that if one fails there's another one, because it's just such high risk. And you know, my heart just goes out to
Absolutely.
that family and other families that have been in that scenario. So
I mean, you and I actually had a side conversation while we were recording that series about this day and age in AI, whether or not there can be like a AI alarm model
yeah,
where it's video surveillance and detecting the pattern of someone falling into the pool, as
yeah,
opposed to ripples on the
yes,
surface, which current
yes.
alarms is how they detect whether or not someone has fallen in.
I saw you put one in that was pediatric skincare regimens on
Yes.
TikTok.
Let me just give my brief summary. It talks about both the skincare regimen, which touches on our acne episode,
Mhm.
and also the influence that, it has on children that consume TikTok, which kind of delves into the screens and the screen use in pediatric population. So I felt like
Yeah.
this was like a good one that highlights kind of multiple problems that parents have to deal with on multiple levels. And what it basically says, it's really cute. Two doctors created their TikTok accounts and then they like made their accounts like they were 13-year-old girls, right? And
Mm,
then they started looking at what TikTok was recommending for them, right?
mhm.
So like let's see what is just coming
Right,
up
right.
for our children as they're creating their
Yes.
TikTok accounts. And apparently they have a For You tab, like I'm
Yeah.
not on TikTok, but For
Yes.
You tab that kind of
Yes.
points relevant content to you.
Yeah.
And they kind of compiled and accumulated 100 unique videos from just what TikTok was feeding
just for
their
you.
13-year-old girl accounts. And they collected both the demographics of who's creating the content, who is the content creator, the number and the types of skincare products that they recommend, and also, very interestingly, the total cost of these regimens.
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
Yes. So you and I kind of highlighted this in our acne episode where we talked about like very expensive marketed brands for acne and how there can be pharmacy generics that are equivalent to that are a fraction of the cost of all of these regimens. So this article kind of highlights and does a study on that price comparison. And these are the results. So the content creators, the ones who are making the TikTok videos to influence these kids, are anywhere between 7 years old to 18 years old. Okay. Right. So
Yeah.
that seems appropriate. And each video had about 1.1 million views. So we're talking viral. And the regimens that they recommend for these kids range from about 6 products costing at an average of $168 per regimen. And only about 1/4 of the videos included actual sunscreen, which is what we recommend, like pretty much the only thing we recommend unless a child has eczema or a skin condition, right? And the top 25 most viewed videos, that was fed to them contained an average of 11 and a maximum of 21 potentially irritating ingredients in their products. So their conclusions were that these skincare regimens on TikTok are not only costly, they infrequently included sunscreen, which is what we actually recommend as pediatricians, and often involve exposure to ingredients that carry a risk of either irritation, allergic contact dermatitis, or something that causes sun sensitivity. And then their overarching conclusion is that they offer little or no benefit for the pediatric population that they're targeting.
Yeah, and I'll go back to something we talked about in that acne episode that I think this is probably detrimental in that it's causing you to even subconsciously put such a focus on what your skin looks like. And we talked so much about how part of the discussion with our teens is setting realistic expectations. And even the fact that they can take a photo and zoom in and look at every pore now. And it sets this idea of perfection, but they're also being fed that on TikTok or wherever that your goal is perfection with your skin.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And it's also a marker of how all of medicine is going to have to also be starting to address all of the information that's out there on social media.
Absolutely.
And using social media as a way to get out information like we're doing. Right.
Yeah. There was another article that I found about parental screen use and the parents using screens as being detrimental to children that want to interact with them.
Yes.
And I remember that I brought it up in the Infants and Screens episode that we did very early on as like a theory of mine. Like I think that this would be something that would be detrimental when your baby's trying to make eye contact with you and you're just looking at your phone. And it was so validating, to see like an actual article highlighting what I said as my pet theory as something that actually is detrimental, not only to infants, but to kids that are trying to interact with their parents, right?
Yes. That episode of that Infants and Screen ones, if you haven't listened to it, go back. I feel like I am most satisfied when I see the numbers on that one still ticking up, that people are still going and listening to that one. Because I like to think that it's helping people establish thoughts about screens from their newborn on, right? That this is like the start of their journey of parenting and they're starting to think about screens in that way and just basic things they can do to launch on a healthy path with screen use with their children.
And I think you've highlighted this in almost every screen episode that we've done this season, that half the battle is just being mindful, trying to think about what would be best for my child when it comes to screens. And this is exactly what you're saying. Like right from infancy, parents are consuming and wanting to find out more and being mindful about their screen plan for their child, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So this officially concludes season 1 of 10 Kids, 2 Docs, parenting insights from pediatrician moms. Thank you so much for joining us for one, some, or all of these episodes this season. And we look forward to having you back for season 2.
Yeah, we are going to take a little bit of a break in August from releasing new material. I think almost any parent out there can relate to the start of school being a particularly busy time. And Sylvia and I, between us, we have 5 children that we are taking to college in the month of August. And I have one starting high school and one starting middle school, which I also think are exceptionally stress points, in addition to our children that are just continuing on in their schools that are going to start school in August. So I feel like that is just one of the most hectic times of the year for any parent. And so we are going to not release new material, but we do have some kind of cool ideas of things we're going to do in August.
Right. So we're not going to be on radio silence. I think one of the things that we're looking to do is re-releasing some of our earlier episodes with kind of more fine-tuned editing.
Yeah, I am actively working on head lice right now. That is still one of my favorites, although I cringe at my fine audio editing back in the day, 6 months ago when I was a naive podcaster. So I'm going to try to digitally remaster that again and see if I can make it a little bit smoother.
A la Disney, digitally remastered and re-released. Or we can call it Vivian's version, like Taylor's version of her re-recorded songs, right?
Right.
That's what I'll entitle it, Vivian's version. The other thing that I was thinking about putting out for some bonus material in the interim is that we have great stories and little anecdotes here and there that just didn't fit into the 20-minute episode that we originally recorded it in. And I was hoping to put together maybe 1 or 2 episodes of outtakes, interesting, fun stories that people might want to take a listen to.
Sounds good. Well, I'm excited.
Yes, and hopefully listeners will rejoin for season 2 starting in September. We're really looking forward to our next season and what we have in store for you.
Okay, great. Enjoy August and dropping your kids off at school for those first days, and we will see you back in September.
Great. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.